This is my presentation on conceptual image. Conceptual image is a movement that prizes ideas over formal and visual components of artwork. Conceptual art, or images, takes on many forms from performance to traditional art. From the 1960s to the mid-1970s, artists were producing works that completely rejected the common standards and ideas of art. Much of the conceptual artists linked their works to the ideas of Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp is said to be the father of conceptual art, as many of his ready-mades rattled the art world, especially his piece, The Fountain. The Fountain was made to poke fun at the American avant-garde world, as it tested the limits of what constitutes a work of art as art. Conceptual artists believe that if the artist began the work, that the museum, gallery, and the audience that are presented with the work finish it. Marcel Duchamp in the early 20th century established the idea of ready-made, as it takes found objects that are then chosen by the artist deemed as art. Without much of intention aside from a signature, this eliminated the idea that works of art needed to demonstrate artistic skill. Though the term concept art used in the earliest 60s, it was not until the late 60s that conceptual art was a defined movement had emerged. Conceptual art is characterized by its use of text as well as imagery. In the piece, The Fountain, Marcel Duchamp decided to take a conventional urinal and place a signature on it, and that signature reads R. Mutt. R standing for the slang word in French as the name Richard, which means money bags, to poke fun at the idea of wealthy people wanting to buy the work. And Mutt is to stand for J.L. Mott, which was during that time was a porcelain urinal company in New York that produced these urinals that he had used. This is not the original urinal that is being used, but this is a replica that was made in the 60s to be placed in a museum. This fountain that he made, to me, it very much pokes fun at the idea of what art can be, because if you were to stand on one side of it without it being in a gallery setting and without you actually knowing that this image or this urinal is even an artwork to be called, you would see it as an average everyday urinal and you wouldn't think twice about it. But those that have a name to be called artists and place their signatures on these items, they are then sold for innumerable amounts of money. And this is what Marcel was exactly making fun of, is that the commercialization of art and how a simple name can make a simple object go from being just that into being artwork. He was a very important figure in the art world, especially during this time, even though conceptual art had not emerged during his time. He was said to have founded it. Unknowingly founding a movement was at that time, having the avant-garde world being the emerging movement is very mind-blowing to think that during the early 20th century, he's the one that actually became the father of conceptual art. This is another one of his pieces where he actually got a carpenter to build a replica of French windows, and it was he took leather and placed it over the window panes of the doors and the panels of the window, and he has very strict instructions that the leather should be polished every day, similar to how leather shoes would be. And in my opinion, when looking at it and thinking about what he wants to be done with this piece, I think about the fact that these windows are completely blacked out, and that having it blacked out, people normally leave their windows dirty, or sometimes when you look out the window, they're very smudged, and that there's dust or dirt covering them, and that it's not always common for you to go outside and wash your windows. Maybe the rain might do it, or maybe the wind will blow whatever debris is on your window away. But in this case, Marcel Duchamp decided to take leather and place it over the window to forcibly make anyone polish the actual panels. Whether or not being able to see through it, you're still polishing that surface as if you're actually cleaning the window. And in my opinion, that's another act of conceptual art where the concept is of somewhat of your own to interpret, and that he took this object and made it into something else is really incredible. Another artist, Sildo Mireles, created multiple images from multiple pieces of work from objects that were found from these Coca-Cola bottles to even money, where there are clear labels added to these bottles that can't be seen until filled with the contents, and that when these bottles would be used in Brazil and recycled back into the companies, this invisible message wouldn't be noticed until they were shipped out to the masses of people and placed back into circulation from factory to wholesale to retail sale and to buyer. None of these would be noticed until the buyer were actually buy the individual bottle themselves, or even a pack that may be labeled with this invisible label. And this was his way to speak out on the unseen troubles that were going on during his time living in Brazil, to where there was a journalist that was imprisoned and killed or murdered, I should say, at some point while in custody of police, and there was never a case that had been solved during that time to tell what was going on. Piero Manzani was another artist. The Artist's Breath is where this artist spoke about how his essence was to live on through his work as he developed the art pieces of his own. In this red mass is actually a balloon that's been plastered to a wood surface, and what looks to be glasses made from rope and various other objects. His statement about the balloon itself and how, I believe this is just a balloon, sorry about the glasses, but I believe that these are weights supposed to weigh down the balloon. But from what he said about the balloon, it was the fact that he could take a simple object and simply breathe what he would call his essence or soul of an artist into this object, and that his essence will still remain even after years or even after his passing, that this is an essence of who he was and him as an artist, that this idea still lives on through this piece of work. Sigmar Polk was another artist that took common objects, and this potato machine has a perpetual device that takes one potato, and at the bottom where there are brackets holding the line that is connected to one potato, the motor at the top is to stimulate the potato as it orbits around the other on the bottom. This is to show that much of conceptual art has no specific basis of what it could be or what it can be. Another very important artist in the conceptual art movement during the 1960s through the mid-1970s was Sol Lewitt, sorry. Sol Lewitt was a conceptual artist that had guides and instructions given to assistants to paint some of his very intricate wall paintings. These wall paintings could be very different and very dynamic at times as different people perceive the instructions differently. In some cases, Sol Lewitt would he would paint his own or begin the painting and then leave it to assistants or even average people to come in and follow these guides. In the drawings, the lines are in his paintings, the lines are spaced and drawn with color and sometimes color pencils or just paint. Some of his drawings or paintings, such as this, a square divided horizontally and vertically in 4 equal parts, each with a different direction or alternative parallel bands of lines. These are one of his drawings that are sometimes done with very intricate instructions from his own or given to assistants for them to follow. So one panel could have been done by him and another panel could have been done by one of his assistants. Each panel might have had different directions, such as maybe draw a solid line to the left or a solid line to the right, but never did it specify whether it would go up or down or from what direction, from the north towards the south or from the east towards the west portion of the panel, which direction would the lines go. Such as this as well, where it goes from being a very light upper row towards the bottom, where it gradually becomes darker through hatching and continuous lines being overlaid over the other. Speaking back to Sildo Mireles, much like the Coca-Cola bottles, he would also take currency and banknotes from countries where they would place stamps onto money and send that back into circulation to speak out on the big idea of the value of money being more worth than a person's life, and that any amount of money can fix that, and any amount of money can fix the problems that are being torn within these countries that are having these big issues, such as America or such as Brazil during these times that were going through wars like the Vietnam War, or going through issues through the government of the journalist that was killed in police custody. No answers can ever be made, but from this statement, money can make that go away. And to me, that is a big statement, though the statement, can't explain it, that I believe the idea of speaking out about what currency can do to a country, whether it can help or impede the people instead of impeding the government, where a simple person's life is not worth even a single dollar, or that a simple person's life can even be made to disappear over $1, is just incredible, and that this speaks very widely on those issues through problem-stricken countries, or money-stricken countries, I should say.